Hello, everyone. This is Gene Geog History, and today I'm going to be talking about Central Asia. So, Central Asia is one of the world's greatest crossroads. Anthropologically, it sits between Europe, the Middle East, South Asia, East Asia, and Siberia. Rather than being a single homogeneous population, it is a broad transition zone where peoples, languages, religions, and genetic ancestries have mixed for thousands of years. Today, Central Asia generally refers to these countries: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Hopefully, I said all those properly. So, geographically, Central Asia is dominated by vast grassland steppes, high mountain ranges, deserts, inland river valleys, oasis cities, and historically, the landscapes, which includes important landscapes like the Pamir Mountains, Tian Shan, Altai Mountains, Karakum Desert, and the Kizilkum Desert, encourage both nomadic pastoralism and settled agriculture around the rivers and oases. Anthropologically, Central Asia is one of humanity's oldest contact zones, as it's been shaped by ancient hunter-gatherers, early Iranian farmers, Bronze Age pastoralists, Indo-European migrations, Turkic migrations, Mongol expansion, Persian civilization, Islamic civilization, and Russian colonization. But unlike many regions where one ancestry dominates, Central Asians often represent layered mixtures that have accumulated over thousands of years. So, major population components. So, a simplified view looks something like this. So, the Western Eurasian ancestry includes ancestry related to the Eastern Europeans, ancient Iranian peoples, Caucasus populations, and ancient steppes people, with traits like greater frequency of lighter pigmentation, long established pastoral traditions, and Indo European linguistic heritage being present. Then you have the Eastern Eurasian ancestry, which derived from populations related to Mongolia, Siberia, and northern China. So, traits generally include East Asian facial morphology, adaptations to cold climates, and connections with ancient nomadic confederations. And to a lesser extent, there are South Asian, West Asian slash Iranian influences too. Okay, so now we're going to get into why they and their descendants are grouped together today. So, the recent Central Asians, and to some extent their descendants abroad, are grouped together today is the result of geography, shared historical experiences, linguistic and cultural ties, as well as modern political boundaries, rather than because they just formed a single biological or racial group. So pretty much one of, or the main reason is geography, the heart of Eurasia. So this is the most fundamental reason, is that they inhabit the same broad region. So for millennia, the peoples of what is now Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan shared trade routes, migration corridors, and ecological zones. Mountains, steppes, deserts, and oasis cities connected them more than the modern borders might suggest or show. The second reason is the Silk Road created a shared civilization. So, for over 2,000 years, Central Asia was the core of the Silk Road. I literally knew absolutely nothing about the Silk Road until like right now. So, this fostered shared religions, artistic styles, architecture, cuisine, technologies, trade networks, and urban culture. The third reason is that the Turkic expansion created cultural unity. So, around the 6th century CE, Turkic speaking people spread across much of Central Asia. Today, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Uzbeks, Turkmens, and Uyghurs all speak Turkic languages, though they speak different branches of the Turkic languages. Although their ancestry varies considerably, they developed many shared cultural features, like nomadic traditions, horseback culture, pastoralism, similar musical traditions, related folklore, overlapping cuisines, and comparable family and clan structures. The main exception is the Tajiks, who speak an Iranian language but have shared much of the region's broader history. Fourth reason is essentially Islam and it becoming a shared identity. So, from roughly the 8th century onwards, Islam spread throughout most of Central Asia. Today, the overwhelming majority of Central Asians are Muslims, primarily Sunni, regardless of whether they are all ethnically Kazakh, Uzbek, Kyrgyz, Tajik, or Turkmen. Religion became another layer of common identity that transcended ethnic differences and lines. Another reason involves the Russian and Soviet rule, essentially unifying the region politically. So perhaps the strongest reason these people are grouped together today, currently, is their shared experience under the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union. So between the late 19th century, so the late 1800s and 1991, so essentially about a century, these populations experienced centralized administration, Russian language education, industrialization, Soviet economic planning, similar institutions, and interconnected infrastructure. The Soviet Union also formally established the five modern republics, reinforcing the idea of Central Asia as a coherent region. The sixth reason is that they occupy a similar genetic transition zone. So, from a biological and anthropological perspective, Central Asians are often grouped between many populations occupying a broad genetic continuum between Western and Eastern Eurasian ancestries. This doesn't mean that they are genetically uniform. So, for example, Tajiks generally have less ancestry closer they have ancestry closer to the Aryan plateau populations with lower average Eastern Eurasian ancestry, and Kazakhs and Kyrgyz generally have higher East Eurasian ancestry. So they have similar mixtures, but the variance is very different. So because these populations overlap genetically and geographically, they're often discussed and grouped together in population genetics, even though there is a substantial diversity within the region. The seventh reason is modern nation states reinforcing the regional identity. Since 1981, the five independent republics have developed distinct national identities, like regional organizations, economic partnerships, water management, migration, shared media, and educational exchanges. As a result, Central Asia has become a widely recognized regional identity alongside national identities. And the final reason are the diaspora communities. So outside of Central Asia, descendants are often grouped together for practical and social reasons. So in countries like Russia, Germany, Turkey, Canada, and the United States, people may be broadly described as Central Asian because they share geographic origins, migration histories, cultural similarities, cuisines, language is from related families for many groups, and religious traditions. So it's similar to how Scandinavian, Balkan, or Caribbean are regional labels that encompass multiple distinct ethnicities. Okay, so now it's time for the timeline of Central Asians. So from 4000 to 10,000 BCE, this is the period of the first modern humans. So the earliest modern humans arrived during the Upper Paleolithic era. So the characteristics include hunter-gatherer societies, mammoth, horse, and bison hunting, seasonal migration across steppes and mountains, and stone tool industries. These populations contributed ancestry to later Siberian, European, and Central Asian peoples. So from 10,000 to 5,000 BCE, this is the Neolithic transition. So after the Ice Age ended, wild cereals became more common, sheep and goats were domesticated. Early farming spread into southern Central Asia from Southwest Asia. Early farming spread into South. So I think that was pretty much Mesopotamia, if I'm remembering correctly. Anyways, northern areas largely remained pastoral and hunter-gatherer. This period established the contrast between oasis farming cultures and steppe pastoralists. Okay, so from 3300 to 2000 BCE, this is the age of the Bronze Age civilizations. So two major cultural worlds emerged. So the first one is the Oxus civilization, otherwise known as BMAC. This was centered in modern Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and northern Afghanistan, which included fortified cities, irrigation agriculture, metallurgy, and long-distance trade, and the Andronovo Horizon, which was across northern Kazakhstan and southern Siberia, where it had horse pastoralism, wagons, bronze metallurgy, and probable Indo-Iranian speakers. These societies are closely associated with the spread of the Indo-Iranian languages. So from 2000 to 1000 BCE, this is the Indo-Iranian expansion. So Iranian-speaking people spread across much of Central Asia. Among them were the ancestors of Scythians, Saka, Sogdians, and Bactrians. This period saw horse warfare, chariots, widespread pastoral nomadism, and increasing trade. So from 1000 to 330 BCE, this is the age of the nomads. So the Eurasian steppe became dominated by Iranian-speaking nomadic peoples. Major groups included the Scythians, the Saka, and the Masagitai. Meanwhile, oasis cities flourished along trade routes. So from 550 to 330 BCE is the Persian rule. Much of southern Central Asia became a part of the Achaemenid Empire. So the important satrapies included Bactria and Sogdia. The Persian administration introduced taxation, roads, imperial governance, and Zoroastrian influence. So from 330 to 250 BCE, this is the period of Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great conquered Central Asia after defeating the Achaemenids. His campaigns reached Bactria, Sogdia, and the Sierra Daria. Greek cities were founded throughout the regions, leaving a lasting Hellenistic influence. Okay, so from 250 BCE to 300 CE, this is when the Silk Road begins. So Central Asia became the center of Eurasian commerce. So merchants transported silk, horses, spices, jade, glass, paper, and precious metals, while religion spread through the region too, like Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, and early Christianity, where cities like Samarkand and Bukhara grew into major commercial hubs. So, from 300 to 600 CE, we had the Iranian kingdoms. So, several powerful Iranian states dominated Oasis civilization. Notable peoples included the Sogdians and the Bactrians, where the Sogdians became some of history's greatest merchants, operating across the Silk Road from China to Byzantium. So from 500 to 900 CE, this is the Turkic expansion. So this is a major demographic that completely transformed the area. Turkic-speaking peoples migrated westward from eastern Eurasia. Major confederations included Gok, Turk, Khanagit, I know I'm going to say these wrong, so I apologize, and Ukar Khaganate. Consequences meant that the Turkic languages spread, many Iranian-speaking populations adopted Turkic languages, and Eastern Eurasian ancestry increased in many regions. Modern Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Uzbeks, and Turkmens largely descend from mixtures of earlier Iranian populations and incoming Turkic groups. So, from 700 to 1000, essentially, Islamization happened. So the Arab expansion introduced Islam. Gradually, Buddhism declined in the area. Zoroastrianism diminished too, and Islam became dominant. Islam became one of the strongest unifying cultural forces across Central Asia. So from 1206 to 1368, this is the Mongol era. So the rise of Genghis Khan reshaped Central Asia. The effects included the destruction of many cities, massive population movements, increased East Asian genetic input in some populations, and integration into a vast Eurasian empire. Despite the violence, the Mongol period also revitalized transcontinental trade. So from 1300 to 1500, this is the Timurid Renaissance. So the Timur established an empire centered on Samarkand. This era saw magnificent architecture, advances in astronomy, literature, mathematics, and Persian and Turkic cultural flourishing consecutively. Samarkand became one of the world's leading intellectual centers. So from 1500 to 1800, this is the period of the Khanates. Following the Timurids, Central Asia fragmented into several states. There was the Khanate of Bukhara, the Khiva Khanate, and the Kokand Khanate. These states relied on oasis agriculture, caravan trade, and regional politics. So from 1800 to 1917, this is the Russian expansion. So the Russian Empire gradually conquered most of Central Asia. Major developments included the railroads, Russian settlements, cotton cultivation, military administration, and integration into the Russian economy. Traditional nomadic life began to change significantly. So from 1917 to 1991 is the Soviet era. The region became part of the Soviet Union. Major changes included industrialization, universal education, secularization, collectivized agriculture, national republics created, and Russian became the common administrative language. The five modern republics emerged from Soviet administrative boundaries. And the final period runs from 1991 to the present day. So this is the independent Central Asia. So following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan became independent states. Current trends include renewed interest in Turkic heritage, revival of Islamic traditions, economic diversification, and growing ties with China, Turkey, Russia, Europe, and South Asia. And the infrastructure development through the initiatives such as the modern Silk Road corridors took place too. Okay, so now we are at the section where I'm going to break down the average phenotype of Central Asians. And before I get into anything, there is no universal Central Asian phenotype. It's mainly just a gradient, and based on the amount in this gradient, we create an average. But let's just get into it. Central Asia is one of the world's broadest zones of human admixture, as there's no single characteristic appearance shared by all Central Asians. Due to this, as there is a climb, i.e., a gradual change from more West Eurasian features in the southwest mainly to the more East Eurasian features in the northeast. So, an average individual is likely to have, when it comes to the skin, light beige to medium olive skin, sometimes slightly golden or tan, usually lighter than the average South Asian, usually darker than the average Northern European. Skin tones may vary more with latitude and ancestry than by national borders. When it comes to the hair, it's nearly universally black or very dark brown, straight, thick, and coarse. Naturally, wavy hair occurs, but it's a lot less common. When it comes to the eyes, it's predominantly dark brown. Occasionally, hazel, green, or blue eyes are uncommon, but it can occur, especially in populations with higher West Eurasian ancestry, such as some Tajiks or northern Kazakhstan communities. Eye shape is highly variable. Some individuals have a pronounced epicantholic fold, others have little or none, many fall in between these extremes. When it comes to the face, many Central Asians have a blend of traits associated with Western and Eastern Eurasian populations. So common features include a moderately broad face, high cheekbones, medium width forehead, a straight nose, moderate nasal bridge, medium lips, rounded to square jawline. Compared with many East Asians, noses are often somewhat more projecting, facial profiles are often less flat on average. Compared to many Europeans or West Asians, cheekbones are often more prominent, epicanthic folds are more common, and faces may be broader on average. When it comes to the beard growth, it's generally moderate on average. When it comes to the body build, historically they share a medium to tall stature, lean but muscular build, broad shoulders, strong legs, reflecting the long history of horseback riding and pastoralism. Okay, so I'm going to very, very generally and very, very quickly talk about the regional variation of Central Asia based on the five areas. So, Tajiks generally resemble populations from northeastern Iran, Afghanistan, and part of the Caucasus, with predominantly Western Eurasian facial morphology with some Eastern Eurasian influence. Uzbeks generally have facial features that reflect both Iranian and Turkic ancestry, so they're a bit more balanced when it comes to their admixture. Turkmens often resemble populations from northeastern Iran and the Caspian region, so they have moderate Eastern Eurasian influence, but a bit more West Eurasian in comparison. Kazakhs typically exhibit stronger East Eurasian influence, so they have more of that admixture within them with the epicanthic folds, the broader faces, and all that jazz. And then the Kyrgyz are among the populations with some of the strongest East Eurasian ancestry as well, with a broad face, high cheekbones, well-developed epicanthic folds, sturdy athletic build, and straight black hair. So, due to all of this, they in general are multi-generationally mixed when it comes to getting admixture from East Eurasians and Western Eurasians over centuries and millennia, arguably. Okay, so the final section of the video is about their relationship with race, and it's relatively complex because Central Asia sits at one of the world's most largest and major population crossroads ever. So, from a biological anthropological standpoint, it is a transition zone, not a separate race. So, modern biological anthropology generally does not treat Central Asians as belonging to a single biological race. Instead, Central Asia is viewed as a client or transition zone between Western and Eastern Eurasian populations. Rather than having sharp boundaries, ancestry changes gradually across geography. So, Western Eurasia is obviously on the west. So, I think if I were to label the countries, it would be Tajiks, who are the most West Eurasian, then the Uzbeks, then the Turkmens are in the middle between West Eurasia and East Eurasia, then leading more towards Eastern Eurasia are the Kazakhs and the Kyrgyz. So that's pretty much what the continuum is. So when it comes to the historical racial classification, so from the 18th to much of the 20th century, physical anthropologists often divided humanity into a few broad races, i.e., Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid. And these systems are now regarded as oversimplified and outdated. Within those older frameworks, Tajiks were often classified as Caucasoid, while Kazakhs and Kyrgyz were often described as having more Mongoloid features. Uzbeks and Turkmens were frequently characterized as intermediate or mixed. These classifications reflected attempts to fit gradual human variation into rigid categories. So it really depended on which ones were closer to what. Kind of like what I described earlier. So, from a genetic point of view, it is also based on a continuum rather than categories. So, genetic studies generally show that Central Asian populations occupy intermediate positions between Western and Eastern Eurasian populations, with substantial variation among groups. Broadly speaking, Tajiks often have higher proportions of ancestry related to populations of the Ionian Plateau and ancient Western Eurasia. Kazakhs and Kyrgyz often have high proportions of Eastern Eurasian ancestry, while Uzbeks and Turkmens often fall right in the middle. Then we have to get into how Central Asians think about their identity. So within Central Asia, people typically identify first by their ethnicity, so either Kazakh, Uzbek, Tajik, Kyrgyz, or Turkmen, then their nation, then language, then clan or tribal affiliation for some groups, then religion, though most of them are Islam. Broad racial labels like white, Asian, or black generally play a much smaller role in their identity. Now we're going to get into how they are viewed in different parts of the world. So this is very interesting, and it depends on the country that they're in. So in North America, most Central Asians are typically perceived as Asian because they originate from Asia. However, individuals with predominantly Western Eurasian features, such as many Tajiks or some Turkmens, may sometimes be perceived as white or Middle Eastern based on appearance. So in Europe, they're often categorized and recognized as Central Asian or Asian, though appearance varies widely enough that some individuals may be mistaken for Eastern Europeans, Middle Easterners, or East Asians. In Russia, there's a long established distinction between ethnic Russians and people from Central Asia. Central Asians are often viewed as a distinct regional group, regardless of whether they have more Western or Eastern looking features. So when it comes to the census, countries label them differently. So, like the United States, people with origins in Central Asia are generally considered Asian for statistical purposes, even though they may identify differently themselves. So, why Central Asia challenges traditions or traditional ideas of race? So, Central Asia illustrates why rigid racial categories have limitations. Within the region, you can find people who resemble populations of the Iranian Plateau, East Asian populations, Siberian populations, or mixed Western and Eastern Eurasian populations. All of these individuals may share the same nationality or even belong to the same ethnic groups. This diversity reflected thousands of years of migration, trade, and intermarriage rather than distinct biological races. Okay, so that is it regarding my commentary on Central Asians. It was very interesting looking into this group. Since I don't know a whole lot about them, I'm definitely going to get into West Africans next, and that is a huge what I'm definitely looking forward to it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon. Bye!